Welcome back to my channel for another video in the Hasselblad camp. And I was just a couple of days back shooting with the X2D 100C and the 35 to 75 millimeter standard zoom on a photo location where I wanted to have a special effect in the image which comes from telecompression in a tele lens. And that image is for a client. And the result looks good, but is not exactly what I wanted to have. And the reason is that with 75 millimeter, which corresponds to about a 60 millimeter lens, I did not get enough telecompression to get the image in the way I intended it to have. So we decided to get for the studio the XCD 135 millimeter plus the teleconverter 1.7 times, and it also comes with a tripod mount ring. I want to quickly unbox in this video these boxes here. Then I will explain the lens, will provide all the details and the features of this lens. Then I'm going to mount it and I will then go back to that photo location and repeat the shooting and hopefully get the image impression I was after. And of course, at the beginning of the discussion, I also will show the photo location and quickly explain why the 75 millimeter images and field of view did not make me as happy as I wanted to be, and why I think that the XCD 135 millimeter will just be a better suited lens for that job. Let's kick off the video. All right, so far so good. It's time for a quick unboxing, but before I want to remark that I never shot the XCD 135 millimeter, and I also didn't own it, although I have a lot of Hasselblad lenses, not only for the X camera system, by the way, in our portfolio here, but this one I have no experience with, so I'm quite curious to actually unbox it, mount it on the camera, look into all the data sheets and specifications, and then most importantly in the last part of the video, going back to that photo location and shooting that lens and hopefully getting the image I really want to have for my client. Let's start with this one here. So if we look at that, this is the Hasselblad tripod mount ring, and that will help, of course, if you mount that heavy lens, which is almost 1 kilogram in terms of weight. We come to that in the specifications, to my X2D without putting too much burden on the camera lens mount. So let's open the box, let's see what's inside. And well, this is what we expect. It's a tripod mount ring, but it's a very solid one, and this is actually originally from Hasselblad, and I use these tripod mount rings also from other brands, but this here is of course very fancy. If you order the XCD 135 millimeter with the 1.7 times converter, the tripod mount ring comes for free in that kit. So you don't have to order it as an extra order, it just comes with the other two boxes and you get it in the kit. Okay, so first box opened, let's put this aside, let's get the second box. Let's have a look what this is. This is the teleconverter, of course, 1.7 times, you see this here. And let's open this up. Let's get a tool here, let's see what we can do to open this. Here we go. And then we have a teleconverter. Okay, that comes in a fancy leather pouch here. Nothing else is in the box. Let's get this out and let's open this up. This is actually a very nice bag here. If you look at that, the pouch, leather pouch engraved with the Hasselblad logo. Very nice, very soft in hand, by the way. I really like that quality here, which you get in that pouch. And then let's get the converter out. Here we go. Very nice. You immediately feel the Hasselblad build quality, which is always super high. So I guess here is the mount to get this on the camera body, of course. And that's the X mount, of course. And then here is how you unlock it and then you can turn it. And then you see here the optics, which is inside. And that's the part where you mount then on top of it the XCD 135 millimeter. Very nice, build quality super high, and I'm really looking forward to test the optical quality of this teleconverter here. Last but not least, we are finally ready for the lens. And you see here on the sticker, this is the 135 millimeter XCD lens. Widest open is an f2.8, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to open this up now. Let's see here with the tool that we get these protections and sealings away. Here we go. Here we have another one. So this one was never used before. It's really fresh and sealed originally by Hasselblad. And then we open the box and have a look inside. All right, here we go. That's it. Wow, let's have a look inside here. So here's the lens, here's the lens hood, and I guess here is another pouch. Let's have a look. Yes, indeed, we have here some paperwork which we don't have to look into, and then we have a pouch. The material of the pouch is also leather, in the same way as what we saw on the Tele converter, and it has in the same way that nice engraving here, if you look, the Hasselblad logo. Very valuable leather pouch if you transport your lens. Very nice. Then we have here the lens hood. Let's get this out. Is a full metal construction. Again, some silica gel to prevent any moisture here. Let's get this away. And if you look at the build quality here, that's so much Hasselblad. I love it. Very solid metal construction in the same way as all the XCD lens hoods with a clear marking how you screw this on the lens. Very nice. Let's put it aside. And then the last item here in that box is the lens, which sits firmly in the box. Let's get it out. It's also still sealed here with plastic. Let's try to open this up here. What a beautiful lens, isn't it? XCD 135mm, Hasselblad, nothing else on that body here. If we look inside, we get more specific information. The filter thread is 77mm. The widest open aperture is an f2.8. And it all goes back to that long tradition to Victor Hasselblad. Very nice. As everyone who follows my content knows, the first thing if I purchase a very expensive lens like this one is to protect the lens. And I can only recommend this to everyone. And of course, it should be a really valuable, really good filter on top of it, because if you put bad glass on top of excellent glass, the outcome will be bad. But it's so easy to get scratches on the front glass element here, and that's why I always have a UV filter or a protector on it, and that's what I also will do here very quickly. And I have one here from Carl Zeiss, which is a UV filter, 77mm, so it fits the filter thread of the lens here. And this is a really good one, and with this one you will not ruin the optical quality of the lens, but it protects the glass. So let's get this mounted. Let me get this out here. Let's get the lens cap away, and let's quickly mount this here. And now I feel so much better, so much more safe. And whatever scratches might find its way to the top side of the lens, it will be caught by the filter and will not harm my very expensive lens here. And that is an expensive filter from Carl Zeiss, of course. It's coated. It's very good from an optical perspective, but it is way of much cheaper than if I would have a scratch on the top glass of my very expensive XCD 135mm. Let's now quickly mount the lens. So let's get this one here off. Very gentle, not rolling away, just stay here. Let's get here this one removed. All right. Let's get this one here easy. Red line is on 12 o'clock and then it's mounted and it looks beautiful. But before we get excited about that lens, let's get this one here protected from the back side at the mount side, and let's put it here. So that's a standard zoom, 35 to 75mm. 75mm was just not enough for what I wanted to achieve. So now we have the XCD 135mm on it, and it's a beautiful camera lens combo if you look at that on the X2D 100C. So what is Hasselblad telling us about this lens? And there are some very nice sample photos actually on the Hasselblad website where people use this lens for landscape with telecompression effect in the way I want to achieve it. So we have first of all a very complex optical construction. We have in the lens itself 10 elements in 6 groups, and in the converter we have another 6 elements in 4 groups. So if you mount this all together, you have all in 16 elements in 10 groups. That's a very complex optical construction. In this combination here we have now 2 different focal lengths. First of all, 135mm. If we mount the 1.7 times converter, we have to multiply 135 by 1.7, which is give or take then a 230mm focal length system here. We also can try to translate the field of view generated by these combinations here into a full frame equivalent setup, and the lens standalone corresponds in a full frame equivalent setup to 105mm focal length and the widest open aperture of f2.2, applying a crop factor of 0.79. And if you mount the converter to the lens, the full frame equivalent focal length comes down from 230mm to about 180 millimeter, 178 I think is the precise number, if you care about the same field of view on a full frame sensor compared to what you shoot here on the larger X2D sensor. What's also always important to bear in mind if you shoot with a teleconverter is that you lose some light, and if you mount a 1.7 times teleconverter on this lens here, which is standalone widest open f2.8, then you have to multiply 2.8 by 1.7, which is then 4.8. So if you combine the converter with the lens, your widest open aperture will no longer be an f2.8 but an f4.8. And that's of course important to note. This lens here is also very good for close-up or macro type shooting situations, and the minimum focusing distance of the lens standalone is exactly 1 meter, and that takes you very close to your subject. And if you combine the lens with the teleconverter, the minimum focusing distance only marginally increases from 1 meter to 1.05 meter, and then you also have a superior magnification ratio or maximum image scale. So standalone with that lens, you have a maximum magnification of 1 divided by 5.8, which is already quite good. But if you mount a teleconverter and you extend the focal length without substantially increasing the minimum focusing distance, you actually come to a maximum image scale or magnification of 1 divided by 3.4, which is almost a macro situation in the way you would purchase it with a macro lens. So that's really good and makes the lens, of course, very flexible. Applications of this lens, in my opinion, classical, of course, is portraits and people photography. But many people, as you see on the Hasselblad website, use tele lenses these days for landscape, which is also the purpose why I purchased this lens and why I will use it in the last part of the video in my shooting. In terms of weight, you have quite something in your hand here. So the lens standalone is at exactly 935 grams. And if you mount a teleconverter in addition, you end up at 1,372 grams for the converter and the lens, plus the weight of the camera body. So this is solid in hand, but also contributes some weight, and I think it's important to mention. The lens, like always on XCD lenses, is fully weather sealed and is in that way capable of shooting in nasty environments in the same way as the camera body itself. It's very robust. It's a full metal construction here. The focus ring is buttery smooth, but with enough resistance. And I think there is not more to say. What I want to try out now is a little bit how autofocus is performing. I also want to check the firmware of the lens, and then you will see me sometime later when I went back to this photo location, did the shooting with that lens and come back with my images. So let's get the lens cap off here and let's switch the camera on and let's quickly check the firmware. So let's switch it on here and let's have a look. Let's go here into settings and then general, and then we go down to service, and on service we have, by the way, the newest firmware for the X2D. If you have missed my video on how to install it, just look it up on my channel. And then, as I said before, 0.6.0 is the most recent firmware on this legacy XCD lenses. So let's quickly check my settings here. I want to shoot widest open f2.8 at 1/200 seconds. ISO is 1600. I'm indoors, of course, and we are in autofocus. So let's have a look here, and let's try to focus first on Jennifer. Here we go. Let's maybe move the focus field a bit to get her better in perspective here. Focus field. It's hunting a bit. Here we go. Let's take a shot. Let's see how this looks like. It takes a while before it updates, but looks crisp and sharp. And by the way, very nice and soft in the background. So that looks good. Let's get here, by the way, a different display view. That's the one I want to have. Let's focus on behind Jennifer here. Let's get the focus field here. And there is my Hasselblad ELM 20 years in space. Let's focus on that. Let's get this here. Now it's updated. Super crisp, super sharp. Look at these engravings here. Very nice. Here you see this is a limited edition, by the way. This is number 1361. 20 years in space, 1962 to 1982. That's, by the way, the camera which was used on the moon mission back then. So a very nice camera. Focusing back on Jennifer. Let's go there. Let me center this. Very good. And yeah, you see it. I mean, it updates now. Very sharp, and by the way, a beautifully soft bokeh in the background. So I like a lot what I'm seeing. I mean, the purpose, of course, is not to try this out in the studio. Let's go out in the field now. Let's go back to my photo location, and then in the photo location, let's shoot with that lens. Let's see if we need the teleconverter. I'm not sure yet. I will quickly mount it for the moment and try it out here so you have a complete picture. For my landscape shooting, 135mm, which equates to 105mm, and a full frame equivalent setup might be enough for what I want to achieve. Before going to my location for the shooting, I wanted to show you how it looks like if the converter is mounted and combined with the lens. And I think that looks really good. It also stands balanced here based on that tripod mount ring. And what I also want to do is quickly take another image of Jennifer and then showing you the difference in perspective. So let's quickly do that here. Let's focus on Jennifer in the same way we did before. Let's see if the autofocus finds it. Here we go. Let's have a look in the magnification. Yeah, this is very, very sharp, very good. And if you compare it now, this is the perspective with the 135mm lens. This is the field of view and perspective if we mount in addition the teleconverter. And now let's go out and shoot, and then I will come back with images, will comment on them, and then finally conclude the video. So here are images taken with both lenses, the 35 to 75mm standard zoom and the 135mm telezoom, which we are discussing in this video. And the view from the location you just saw in that little video clip is this one here. And I was there around the blue hour. You see here in the background nicely Mount Rigi. Lightroom will update this in a moment. It says loading here. And that is a very famous mountain in Switzerland. So Mount Rigi is well known, in particular in Canton Zug, Schwyz, and so on. And you see here, this has a lot of foreground. It's based on the medium format sensor format we have here, of course. And I didn't like that. That's why I wanted to get closer to the city here. So this is Zug City in the background. And I wanted to get closer to that and wanted to have more compression effect. You nevertheless see here that there is compression effect coming from 75mm, which is what I was using here. So we have the city here, we have the lake quite compressed together and the mountains in the background as the last layer in the image, but we have a huge foreground layer, which I really didn't like. That's not the perspective I wanted to offer to my client. Looking at the images from my first shooting with the 35 to 75mm lens, you also see that I did some exposure bracketing here. And then the final image composing these four images into one was this one. And I think this looks already better. The foreground is no longer so dominant. It's a super sharp and crisp image. If you look into City of Zug here, very nice. And clearly I need to apply some perspective correction here, but it looks quite nice. And you also have in the foreground here a lot of details in that neighborhood here that looks all really good. And also the foreground, the grass is sharp and crisp. I think this is an image I could use. And in particular, again, we see famous Mountain Rigi here in the background. Very crisp and very sharp. Going back to the library, here you see another exposure bracketing taking place. And I think in general, these images are usable. In particular, if you crop in, like here, for instance, let me go into that one here. That looks quite nice. You have less foreground now, but you also have more a 16:9 format here now. And it looks really like a panorama shooting. Here I already applied perspective correction, so the buildings look crisp and nice. And we have here also a lot of light trails coming from the traffic in that evening. I think in general, if you look at the level of detail captured by the 35 to 75mm lens on the X2D, of course, with more than 100 megapixel, is a terrific image quality you get out of these images. As said earlier in the video, I came back to the same location, exactly the same spot, but this time not with the 35 to 75mm lens, but the 135mm lens. And I also immediately tried out how the perspective is and the field of view if I shoot it with the 1.7 teleconverter. And that gave me this image here. And this is too much telecompression. So I got very close to the city of Zug, but it cut off the mountains at the upper side of the image. So I removed later the teleconverter. But before we go into that, let's quickly go here into 100% crop. And you see this is despite the hazy weather conditions we had at the second shooting time, a really good image. You get a lot of details here in the image. You see all the engravings here on the buildings, you know, Avanta and what have you. It looks really good. Here you have a garage and lots of details on the cars. So it looks good, but this was too much of telecompression. That's also not what I wanted. So we had two sides of the spectrum of extremes now. Not enough telecompression, too much telecompression. So I unmounted the teleconverter, and then I came to another perspective, which was this one here. And this looks now better. Unfortunately on that day, this is by the way not post-processed, unfortunately on that day there were lots of clouds, and my client wants to see Mountain Rigi in the background, which is here, and it's completely covered and hidden by clouds. So I need to go there a third time to get the image the client is after and I'm after, but it's the right perspective now. There is no more foreground. We have that little neighborhood here in the foreground, but not so much grass. And we are very close to Zug city here. By slight rotation of the tripod, I then combined 3 of these images into one and ended up with this image. And that's now the perspective I wanted to have. You see here nicely the telecompression effect, city of Zug, the lake, the Mountain Rigi in the background. They're very close together. There's no more grass in the foreground, but a little bit of the neighborhood here. And that's exactly the perspective and field of view I wanted to have. Unfortunately, on that day, as I mentioned before, that famous mountain here in the background is covered by clouds. And so I will have to go there for a third time, repeating the shooting. But I know now the spot I discovered at my first shooting. I know what lens I want to take. That's the 135mm lens. I don't need the teleconverter in my backpack. And I just need now good weather conditions. And then I can conclude my journey to that image I was after. So that looks really good. Looking into details in this image, absolutely brilliant. The X2D 100C with that 135mm lens is delivering from all angles. Look at the level of detail we have here. Also in the neighborhood in the foreground, let's scroll here a little bit through the 100% crop. This is absolutely brilliant. It looks really, really good. I like a lot what I'm seeing, and I think that's the end of my mission. Now, when I returned to Zurich on my way, I discovered by chance another spot, which I also like very much, and I wanted to quickly show. And that's this view here. And here, if the clouds are not there, and if I get there under better weather conditions, Mount Rigi here on the left-hand side in the background will be fully visible. Also some other mountains here in the scene. In the foreground, I have the city of Zug, and the telecompression effect of 135mm, as I said, in the full frame equivalent is about 105mm, just compresses the image in a way that the city, the lake, and the mountains get very close together. And if you would shoot that image with a wide angle lens, the mountains would just be in the background, a fine line with no details. But if you shoot that with a tele lens, you get this telecompression effect you are seeing in that image. And that's also a very nice image. And we get a lot of detail in the city here. We see nicely in the background the hills, the mountains. As I said, it's cloudy at this point in time, so not super impressive. But I will get back also to this location and take that photo because that has a very special atmosphere. And I like a lot the way the lens and the camera have rendered the scene in front of the lens. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.